Stop. While you believed your doctor was healing you, you became the foundation of the world's largest business. Pharmaceutical companies do not want to cure you. They want to manage you. Billions of dollars have been invested not to eliminate disease, but to create permanent customers. We expose their secret, the PHARMA Code, which explains how your health became the most expensive monopoly on Earth, why the price of your cure was determined not in a science lab, but on the floor of the US Congress. The first prescription. How treating symptoms became a trillion-dollar business model, 1950s present. The modern pharmaceutical industry is not a benevolent healthcare system. It is a meticulously engineered financial mechanism designed exclusively for perpetual profit. The core mission was never finding a final cure. It was the cynical invention of the most profitable subscription service for human health. While labs are marketed as centers of hope, they are strategically optimized engines for managing chronic illness, because a lifelong patient, generating recurring revenue, is worth exponentially more to investors than a one-time cured customer. This global pharmaceutical empire, with over $1.5 trillion in annual profits and near absolute political control, was built on a cold, strategic shift away from the medical ethic of eradication. This shift created the foundational corporate pillar, the code of symptom management and therapeutic delay. This is not an accident of the market. It's a calculated strategy to optimize human biology for maximal corporate yield. The cure betrayal. The financial cost of being healed. In the mid-20th century, before medicine was fully corporatized, pharmaceutical companies faced a brutal economic paradox. Developing a single curative vaccine, like the polio vaccine by Jonas Salk, meant immediately destroying a potential long-term revenue stream. Once the disease was eradicated, the predictable cash flow vanished. Salk's famous refusal to patent his life-saving discovery, asking, "Can you patent the sun?" was seen by corporate finance as an unacceptable demonstration of risk. This economic reality forced a profound change. Executive boards concluded that true sustainable value was not in the short-term victory of a cure, but in the daily, mandatory maintenance of illness that guaranteed future income. The result was the systematic abandonment of single-dose cures in favor of chronic lifelong treatments for conditions like diabetes, hypertension, and depression. This strategic and ethical collapse, the shift from curing to managing, was the single most defining event in the industry's history. It established two critical unspoken rules. 1. Never prioritize a curative, single-use product that removes a potential customer from the continuous revenue stream. 2. Ensure total legal control over patent lifetimes and pricing through aggressive lobbying, securing a reliable high-margin monopoly. The strategic birth of the chronic care model and the R&D illusion. The true strategic brilliance resides in the finance teams, who grasped that a perpetual treatment was the ultimate perpetual financial asset. Consequently, companies redirected the majority of their budget away from radical research and toward Me Too drugs, minor chemical modifications of existing blockbusters. These tweaks are primarily designed to extend legal patents and dominate market share, ensuring competition remains minimal and pricing power is maintained. This strategic engine functions through three interlocking mechanisms. Financial shield, the perpetual flow. Prescription revenue flows in predictable, continuous torrents, providing the necessary capital to satisfy Wall Street's demand for high quarterly returns. The managed patient is guaranteed to be a loyal, high-value customer, securing a financial annuity for the corporation. The lobbying moat, regulatory capture. Pharma funnels billions directly into powerful lobbying efforts. The objective is to actively design and write the regulatory laws themselves. They lobby to extend patent exclusivity, create bureaucratic obstacles for generic competitors, and systematically block any legislation that would lower drug prices or allow for free market competition from abroad. This guarantees the high-priced domestic monopoly remains sacrosanct. The R&D illusion. While pharmaceutical giants publicize massive R&D spending, a disproportionate amount of actual foundational scientific research is initially funded by taxpayer dollars through public institutions like the NIH. The corporations then purchase the patent rights to these publicly funded discoveries at a discounted rate, finalize development, and then claim all the credit, and critically, set the monopolistic price. They execute a business model where they privatize the profit while socializing the risk. Today, the largest pharmaceutical companies have turned human fragility and chronic illness into the bedrock of a vast financial empire. They proved that owning the treatment and ensuring its constant, lifelong usage was the only way to build a true, ironclad financial monopoly over life itself. The monopoly engine. How patent law was weaponized to block cures and crush generic competition. 1980s present. If Part 1 detailed the strategic choice to abandon cures for chronic maintenance, Part 2 exposes the legal mechanism used to enforce that choice, the patent code. In the world of big pharma, the patent is not a simple legal protection. It is a meticulously crafted financial weapon. This system, originally designed to incentivize innovation, has been systematically twisted by corporate legal teams to ensure perpetual market exclusivity, artificially inflating drug prices and blocking cheaper generic, life-saving alternatives from reaching the public. This weaponization of patent law, funded by billions in lobbying, is the single greatest reason why a single pill can cost hundreds of dollars in one country and pennies in another. It's the mechanism that protects the life tax. The evergreening scam, innovation by loophole. The foundational promise of the patent system is that after a set period, usually 20 years, the drug formula becomes public domain, allowing generic manufacturers to step in, reduce prices, and save lives. This moment, known as the patent cliff, is pharma's ultimate financial nightmare. To circumvent this, mega companies perfected a strategy called evergreening, the trivial modification. As a patent nears its expiration, companies fund research into minor, insignificant modifications of the original drug. This might involve a slightly different chemical salt, a new delivery method, e.g. tablet versus capsule, or a minuscule change in dosage. The new patent. They then file for an entirely new patent based on this trivial change. This action effectively resets the 20-year clock, often blocking generic versions of the original drug from entering the market for another decade. The purpose. The goal is not better medicine. It is purely patent extension and profit protection. It ensures the public continues to pay monopoly prices for a drug that is decades old. The system punishes true innovation and rewards legal trickery. The Hatch-Waxman twist, an unintended loophole. In 1984, the U.S. Congress passed the Hatch-Waxman Act, intended to balance innovation for brand-name drugs with affordability for generics. Pharma immediately found the loophole. Delaying tactics. The law allows the brand-name company a statutory 30-month delay on a generic competitor's entry simply by filing a new lawsuit against them, regardless of the suit's merit. Pharma routinely files multiple, often frivolous lawsuits based on evergreened patents. This expensive and aggressive legal strategy is known as delay and deny, settlements and payouts. To ensure the generic companies stay out entirely, big pharma often resorts to pay-for-delay schemes. The brand name company secretly pays the generic manufacturer billions of dollars to not release their cheaper version for several years. This is legalized collusion, directly harming consumers yet difficult to prosecute. The manufacturing of evidence. Clinical trial manipulation beyond the legal system. Pharma wields immense control over the scientific evidence itself. Clinical trials, which determine a drug's safety and effectiveness, are overwhelmingly funded and controlled by the companies that stand to profit from them. Data suppression. Negative or unfavorable results from clinical trials are often buried, unpublished, or strategically minimized. Only the successful, positive trials are aggressively promoted to doctors and the public. Ghostwriting. Studies published in prestigious medical journals are sometimes ghostwritten. The article is secretly drafted by a corporate marketing firm, and then a respected academic is paid to attach their name to the study, lending it false credibility. This ensures the company's marketing message is disguised as independent scientific fact. The ultimate goal of the patent code and the manipulation of evidence is simple: control the supply, control the science, and control the price. They have successfully engineered a legal fortress around their most profitable products, ensuring that the life tax is paid monthly, without competition. The cash register in Congress. How pharma buys silence, shapes legislation, and controls regulatory bodies. 1990s present. The legal fortress built on patent manipulation, Part 2, is utterly useless if Congress or regulatory bodies decide to change the rules. Therefore, Big Pharma's most vital investment is not in molecular chemistry, but in political chemistry. For every $1 spent on lobbying, the industry can expect a return of over $100 in tax breaks, prolonged monopolies, and blocked cost-saving legislation. Pharma doesn't merely influence government. It treats government as a subsidiary designed to protect its revenue streams. This system of political influence, funded by an endless stream of cash, is the mechanism that ensures the United States remains the only developed nation where the government cannot negotiate drug prices on behalf of its citizens. The lobbying blitzkrieg, the art of regulatory capture. Pharma's political dominance is executed through three powerful, interlocking strategies: the revolving door, regulatory capture. The industry ensures that key regulatory bodies, particularly the FDA, Food and Drug Administration in the U.S., are controlled by individuals who are either former or future pharma executives and lobbyists. An executive leaves pharma, takes a high-level job at the FDA, approving drugs, and then leaves the FDA to take an even more lucrative job back in the industry. This is a deliberate circular system known as regulatory capture. It ensures that regulators prioritize industry profitability over public safety or affordability. Targeted political donations. Pharma spends hundreds of millions annually on lobbying and political campaigns, focusing overwhelmingly on members of Congress who sit on committees that oversee health, finance, and trade. This money is not a gift. It is a mandatory investment to ensure the politician votes to keep drug prices high and block any generic competition. A politician voting for lower drug costs risks losing their largest campaign funding source. The grassroots illusion. Astroturfing. When Big Pharma needs to defeat a price control bill, they create fake patient advocacy groups, known as astroturfing. These groups, funded secretly by pharma, loudly claim that the proposed legislation would kill innovation or harm patient access. This manufactures a powerful public opposition using patients as shields, successfully manipulating emotional arguments to protect corporate profits. The attack on negotiation blocking Medicare. The single largest cash flow protection measure implemented by pharma was securing the 2003 provision that forbids Medicare, the U.S. government program covering seniors, from negotiating drug prices. The cost of inaction. If Medicare, the largest single buyer of prescription drugs in the world, were allowed to negotiate prices, experts estimate this could save taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars. The why. Pharma successfully lobbied to block this negotiation power, arguing that lower prices would stifle research. In reality, this single piece of legislation guarantees pharma an untouchable stream of high-margin revenue from tens of millions of elderly Americans funded by the taxpayer. This is the ultimate political dividend for their lobbying investment. The global price disparity, a deliberate strategy. The lobbying code ensures that Americans pay exorbitant prices compared to every other developed nation, Canada, Germany, UK. The American payer. Pharma intentionally treats the U.S. market as the cash cow. Because of the block on price negotiation, U.S. consumers effectively subsidize the lower drug costs for the rest of the world. The extortion. Pharma often threatens to pull key drugs from countries that attempt to impose fair price limits, effectively using their monopoly power to extort favorable pricing terms globally, while relying on U.S. consumer dollars to fund their bottom line. Through a brilliant system of regulatory capture and political investment, pharma has created a permanent, self-sustaining financial fortress. The system is designed to convert sickness into wealth, with the full silent complicity of the political establishment. The pricing hostage. How pharma holds life-saving drugs. Captive to block competition, 2000s present. The legal maneuvering over patents, Part 2, creates a ticking time bomb for Big Pharma, the patent cliff. This is the moment a blockbuster drug's exclusive right expires, causing revenue to drop by up to 90% overnight as generics flood the market. Pharma's genius solution to this cliff is dark and highly unethical. They use life-saving specialty drugs for cancer, HIV, or rare diseases as strategic hostages in their financial war against generic competition. This mechanism ensures that the monopoly over the most critical, life-altering treatments is maintained at all costs, regardless of the humanitarian impact. This is the new cold chapter in the Pharma Code, the monetization of desperation, the strategic price hike, maximizing the final year. Before a major drug goes over the patent cliff, Pharma engages in a calculated, high-risk strategy to extract every last cent of profit. The final price explosion? In the final years leading up to the expiration, companies often execute massive, arbitrary price hikes on the drug. This isn't based on R&D costs. It's a final, aggressive grab for short-term revenue to cushion the inevitable drop. This action forces patients to pay astronomical prices for treatments they desperately need, using their illness as a financial lever. The stock market signal. This price gouging strategy is a direct signal to Wall Street investors. We are maximizing shareholder value before the fall. The patient becomes a temporary financial instrument, disposable once the patent expires. The hostage strategy. Blurring the lines. The most ethically questionable practice involves the use of their most critical drugs to delay generic entry across their entire portfolio. The REMS blockade, regulatory programs like REMS, risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, are meant to ensure a drug's safe use. Pharma weaponizes these programs. They often refuse to provide generic companies with samples of the branded drug, samples that are legally required for the generic maker to conduct comparative testing. They justify this refusal by falsely claiming the generic maker might misuse the highly potent drug, thereby legally blocking the generic from even beginning the testing process. The orphan drug. SHIELD. Pharma exploits the Orphan Drug Act, intended to incentivize research for rare diseases by applying it to widely used drugs or slightly modified versions. This provides them with additional years of market exclusivity and lucrative tax breaks, far beyond the initial patent. They turn a humanitarian exemption into a profit shield. The ultimate consequence, the loss of decades. This deliberate strategy of blocking cheaper alternatives has a measurable, devastating impact. Life-saving delay. Every year that a company successfully delays the introduction of a generic HIV, cancer, or heart disease drug means billions in profit for pharma. But it also means millions of low-income patients globally are denied access to affordable treatment. The delay becomes a death sentence for those in developing nations. Economic strain. The artificially high prices drain national healthcare systems and drive personal medical debt in countries without price controls, directly impacting the economic stability of millions of families. The patent cliff code proves that pharma views life-saving drugs not as medical necessities, but as strategic financial weapons to be deployed against competitors and consumers alike, ensuring that the cost of survival remains astronomical. The arbitrary equation. How drug prices are set to maximize theft, not reflect cost. 1990s present. In every functioning market, price is a reflection of two factors: cost of production and competition. The pharmaceutical market adheres to neither rule. Drug prices are not set by the cost of the ingredients, the cost of labor, or even the cost of the original research. Instead, they are determined by one factor alone: the price of intolerance. That is, the maximum price a dying or suffering patient or their insurance provider is willing to pay to maintain life or alleviate chronic pain. This arbitrary pricing structure is the final, brutal proof that the Pharma Code views medicine not as a public good, but as a luxury commodity reserved for those who can afford the life tax. The 10,000% markup. The myth of R&D cost. Pharma's constant justification for astronomical prices is the purported cost of research and development, R&D. This is a carefully constructed corporate illusion. The production reality. The actual manufacturing cost of many blockbuster drugs is often shockingly low. For example, a single tablet costing thousands of dollars to the patient may cost less than $1 to produce. The profit margins often exceed 1,000%, sometimes even 10,000%. The R&D shell game. While pharma spends heavily, studies consistently show that companies spend significantly more on marketing, advertising, and lobbying than they do on actual foundational R&D for novel drugs. The industry spends billions to convince doctors and patients to buy existing drugs, while claiming that all revenue is necessary to fund the next great cure. This is a lie designed to deflect public anger. Pricing by value. Companies justify their prices not on cost, but on value. The idea that a drug that prevents a $1 million hospital stay is worth $500,000. This calculation strategically ignores the patient's ability to pay, effectively turning human health into a simple economic variable. The pricing tactics. The two-part punch. Pharma uses two specific tactics to ensure maximal extraction from both the government and the consumer. Anchor pricing. When a new, slightly better drug hits the market, pharma sets the price not based on its cost, but by ensuring it is positioned just above a similar, existing high-priced drug. The anchor. This creates a continuous upward spiral of pricing across the entire therapeutic class, regardless of technological improvement. The launch price shock. When a truly novel drug, especially for cancer or hepatitis C, is launched, it enters the market at an unprecedented, shocking price point, often $100,000 to $300,000 per treatment course. This high price is designed to normalize such costs in the public consciousness and among insurers, making all future drugs launched at $50,000 or $60,000 seem reasonable by comparison. This is a deliberate strategy of price normalization. The consequences of arbitrary pricing. The pricing code has devastating consequences that go beyond financial ledgers. Medical bankruptcy. In countries without price control, the arbitrary cost of drugs is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy, forcing millions of people to choose between financial ruin and life-saving treatment. Rationing by wealth. Doctors are subtly forced to ration care, choosing high-cost treatments only for the most affluent patients or those with the best insurance, effectively creating a two-tiered system of life and death based on economic status. The global stigma. The high prices place a global stigma on pharma, reinforcing the idea that they are an extractive force rather than a partner in global health. The pricing code reveals the industry's true belief. Human suffering is a resource, and its mitigation should be treated as a scarce, exorbitantly priced commodity. The scientific shield. How pharma controls research, buries negative data, and manufactures public truth. 2000s present. The Pharma Code relies not just on legal patents and political lobbying, but on the perceived sanctity of science. If a drug's effectiveness is questioned or its side effects exposed, the entire financial model collapses. Therefore, pharma's most insidious investment is the capture of scientific discourse. They ensure that the only truth that reaches doctors, patients, and regulators is the version that protects the company's profitability. This process, known as publication bias and data capture, is the final, invisible layer of the industry's defense, turning independent research into a corporate marketing tool. The suppression strategy. Burying the evidence. Pharma knows that not every clinical trial will be positive. Their strategy is simple. Control the narrative by controlling the data itself. Selective publication. Negative or inconclusive results from drug trials are routinely suppressed or simply never published. The vast majority of studies that appear in prestigious medical journals are those that show a positive outcome, creating an artificially favorable impression of the drug's effectiveness. This systemic distortion is called publication bias. The clinical trial secrecy. Unlike publicly funded research, the raw data from pharma-funded trials often remains proprietary and hidden from independent academic review. If a scientist wants to reanalyze the results to check for errors or suppressed side effects, they are legally blocked, ensuring the company's interpretation remains the final word. The misleading study design. Companies sometimes design trials specifically to show their drug is superior to a competitor's. This is often done by giving the competitor's drug at a suboptimal dose or comparing their new, high-priced drug to an outdated, less effective placebo, guaranteeing a statistically favorable outcome for their product. Ghostwriting and the erosion of integrity. The control over scientific papers goes deeper than data selection. It involves manufacturing the authorship itself. Ghostwriting. Highly sophisticated marketing firms hired by pharma secretly draft scientific articles that promote the company's drug. These articles are then offered to respected, influential academic doctors who are paid to attach their names as the primary authors. These academics, known as guest authors, lend the papers false credibility, allowing the corporate marketing message to be disguised as independent, peer-reviewed science. Key opinion leaders, KOLs. Pharma aggressively recruits and funds influential doctors and researchers known as KOLs. These KOLs are paid handsomely to promote the drug to their peers at medical conferences and through published articles. They become highly credible spokespeople whose primary loyalty shifts from their patients to the pharmaceutical funding source. The marketing machine, selling the sickness. This carefully managed scientific narrative is then weaponized through massive marketing budgets. Part 5. Disease-mongering. Pharma actively engages in disease-mongering, the practice of medicalizing normal human experiences or mildly problematic symptoms and aggressively marketing them as a serious, widespread disease that requires their specific, expensive drug. This expands the definition of sick, turning millions of healthy people into potential lifelong patients. Examples include certain anxiety levels or age-related conditions. Direct-to-consumer advertising, DTC. In the few countries that permit it, primarily the US and New Zealand, pharma spends billions on TV, print, and digital ads to bypass the doctor entirely. This creates patient demand for a specific brand-name drug, pressuring doctors to prescribe it, even if a cheaper, equally effective generic is available. The data code ensures that pharma not only controls the market, but also controls the very definition of health and sickness, making it almost impossible for the public to access an unbiased truth. The final monopoly. How pharma's control threatens global security and what happens when the system fails. The endgame. We have traced the pharma code through its 7 deadly phases. The abandonment of the cure, Part 1. The weaponization of the patent system, Part 2. The capture of politics, Part 3. The blocking of competition, Part 4. The arbitrary price gouging, Part 5. And the manufacturing of scientific truth, Part 6. The ultimate destination of this code is terrifying. The complete financial control over human longevity and suffering, placing global public health security in the hands of a few private, profit-driven entities. This final chapter explores the ultimate risks created by this corporate supremacy and ends with a call for the audience to recognize the cost of silence. The pandemic profits, monetizing global catastrophe. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed the pharma code's endgame in its most glaring form. When a truly novel existential threat emerged, the pharma model did not collapse. It adapted and flourished. Socializing risk, privatizing reward. Governments poured billions of taxpayer dollars into pharma companies to fund the research, development, and purchase of vaccines and treatments, socializing the financial risk entirely. The price control fight. As soon as the vaccines proved effective, pharma fought ferociously against waiving patent rights, IP protection, which would have allowed poorer nations to manufacture cheap generic versions quickly. They prioritized market exclusivity and shareholder returns over global eradication, leading to massive vaccine inequity and prolonged the pandemic's impact. The perpetual booster model. The strategic shift was immediate, turning the emergency vaccine into a perpetual booster shot subscription service. This guarantees a recurring revenue stream, solidifying the model that profit must continue, even in the face of a global crisis. The innovation trap, the real cost of corporate control. Pharma's dominance creates a dangerous innovation trap that slows down true medical progress. The anti-antibiotic strategy. There is little financial incentive to develop new antibiotics to combat deadly, drug-resistant bacteria, superbugs. Why? Because a successful antibiotic cures a patient quickly, low profit, while a chronic disease drug provides decades of revenue, high profit. Pharma actively avoids the research humanity needs most, as it doesn't align with the chronic care model. The brain drain. The immense salaries and resources offered by pharma draw the brightest scientific minds away from non-profit public institutions. This concentrates intellectual capital within corporate walls, ensuring that all major discoveries remain proprietary and inaccessible to the public unless purchased at an astronomical fee. The conclusion: are we patients or products? The Pharma Code has successfully commodified the human body. We are no longer viewed as citizens deserving of care. We are products whose ailments represent revenue opportunities. The entire infrastructure, from the lab bench to the halls of Congress, is meticulously optimized to ensure that the life tax is paid without fail. The system is perfect for its owners, but catastrophically flawed for the public. The question is not if the system will fail under the weight of its own greed, but when it will fail, and how many lives will be lost when the next global threat arrives and the solution remains locked behind a paywall. This is not just an industry. This is an economic weapon. The only way to dismantle a monopoly built on silence is with unignorable, catastrophic noise. Share this series to expose the code. Subscribe for the next investigation. The cure for corruption is awareness. Don't be a quiet customer.